honorable ancestor Malcolm X's political life is well documented. So here we will focus mainly on how he influenced critical entities of the mainstream civil rights movement. Malcolm, the courageous, influential, and charismatic leader within the Nation of Islam, had one huge ideological difference with the leader, Elijah Muhammad, and several of his top officials. As long as Malcolm functioned as the mouthpiece of Elijah Muhammad, he was not allowed to participate in the political activities of the civil rights movement, which caused this rift. And Elijah wanted it this way because it was profitable for his organization to remain strictly religious from the tax breaks. Elijah Muhammad gave Malcolm the green light to verbally attack mainstream civil rights leaders in the early 1960s. Even though Malcolm criticized the movement, even under the leadership of the Nation of Islam, he offered civil rights leaders chances to speak at unity rallies in Harlem.
Here in Harlem, from today on in, most of us out here are really black-minded, frankly, and are nationalistic, African nationalists, black nationalists, every kind of nationalist. Don't care whether you're a Baptist or Methodist or holy roller, foot washer, or sanctified, in Christ, on Christ, or around Christ. You catching hell right here with all of us together. NAACP, CORE, Martin Luther King, Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, A. Philip, Randolph, Paul Zuber, Percy Sutton, I saw him standing around there a minute ago. Everybody who is black and interested in black people, let us sit down and find out how we can get together in one direction against one enemy and accomplish this job overnight.
Infiltration from the United States government through the Federal Bureau Investigation Unit played on the issues that Malcolm had from an ideological standpoint with the Nation of Islam. Malcolm was misrepresented in some statements about the President Kennedy's assassination, which was then used as the pretext to completely remove Malcolm from the nation. In March of 1964, Malcolm X went public and announced his break from the Nation of Islam and how he wanted to work with the mainstream civil rights movement to liberate black people in this country.
Because 1964 threatens to be a very explosive year on the racial front, and because I myself intend to be very active in every phase of the American Negro struggle for human rights, I have called this press conference this morning in order to clarify my own position in the struggle, especially in regards to politics and nonviolence. Internal differences within the Nation of Islam forced me out of it. I did not leave of my own free will, but now that it has happened, I intend to make the most of it. Now that I have more independence of action, I intend to use a more flexible approach toward working with others to get a solution to this problem. I'm not out to fight other Negro leaders or other Negro organizations. We must find a common approach, a common solution to a common problem. As of this minute, I have forgotten everything bad that the other leaders have said about me, and I pray they can also forget the many bad said about them. The problem facing our people here in America is bigger than all the other personal or organizational differences. Therefore, as leaders, we must stop worrying about the threat that we seem to think we pose to each other's personal prestige and concentrate our united efforts toward solving the unending hurt that is being done daily to our people here in America.
Malcolm X actually had his first official interaction with SNCC as early as 1961 when he was invited by SNCC to engage in a public debate with Bayard Rustin. Rustin was a key advisor to Martin Luther King and a principal influencer to King's commitment to nonviolence as a principle. King, Rustin, and the broader civil rights movement were not prepared for the impact Malcolm's staunch opposition to nonviolence would have on SNCC organizers as a result of his performance during that debate.
The problem can never be stated in terms of black and white. And any movement which begins by blotting out the active cooperation of the best minds, many of which are white as well as black, is fighting a losing battle.
If white immigrants can come to this country 50 years ago with nickels and dimes and no education, and come here and pool their little nickels and dimes and no education, and set up little stores, develop these stores into larger stores, develop this into an industry which creates job opportunities for whites. Since Lincoln was supposed to have freed the black man 100 years ago, and today the black man, according to the government economists, has spending power of $20 billion per year. We feel that with the black man spending $20 billion a year, not setting up any businesses, not creating any industry, not creating any job opportunities for his own kind, he's not in a moral position to point the finger today at the white man and tell the white man that he's discriminating against him for not giving him a job in factories that he himself set up. If the black man has $20 billion, and these so-called Negro leaders are such geniuses that they can integrate white restaurants and integrate white factories and force themselves into that which the white man has set up, they should use this same ingenuity to show the black people how to pool our wealth and set up something of our own. And then we won't have to force our way into his anymore.
Malcolm won major points with SNCC activists by speaking directly to the concerns mounting within them about being committed to the philosophy of nonviolence when the people they were fighting against didn't adhere to the same principles. To many in SNCC, Malcolm's belief that nonviolence is an effective tactic when working, but self-defense is better when necessary, made much better practical sense based on their actual experiences. As a result, many staffers within SNCC continue to be influenced further by Malcolm's ideas after that debate event, and some of them even managed to maintain communication with Malcolm. One example of this was a reported meeting at an ice cream parlor in Harlem in 1963. There is no evidence that this meeting was anything beyond a chance meeting, but Malcolm was there, and so was Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, and Cleveland Sellers. Malcolm, Carmichael, and Sellers engaged in ice cream consumption while also consuming the merits of Malcolm's position that our struggle was more than just one of civil rights in a backward society. And that consistent with that position, if this government was not willing to make any level of commitment to ensure our lives were protected, we have the right and responsibility to protect ourselves. That ice cream parlor discussion extended for a period of time, and long after the ice cream was eaten, the SNCC organizers left that meeting with fresh and personal validation for the emerging militant beliefs that they were exploring, which were confirmed by the concepts being advanced by Malcolm X. From that point forward, SNCC activists, particularly those like Stokely Carmichael, who had roots in more nationalist formations within SNCC, like Howard University's Nonviolent Action Group, began to push the concepts expressed by Malcolm X more and more in SNCC spaces. There was growing support for these debates since the ideas Malcolm was articulating squared up much better with the on-the-ground realities that SNCC organizers faced in the South than the ideas of Dr. Martin Luther King, which were more and more people within SNCC began to feel were somewhat disconnected from the realities of the work that they were doing.
Can you talk about Malcolm X at Howard in 1962? What effect did his speech have on you?
Well, that takes me back quite a bit, We had quite some problems at Howard University with the administration of students. They had stifled a lot of intellectual activity, which could help to liberate the minds of the students and create the type of activities that we needed as student activists. And we thought then of putting together a project called Project Awareness. And we wrote the Project Awareness proposal. Michael Thurwell at that time was with the school newspaper, I think it was called The Hilltop. And he was also part of our group. And we wrote up a big, intellectually sounding, flowing project to bring people to debate with ideas, to bring stimulus to the university. And the administration was so happy they agreed to it. Because, they said, oh, Fannie, they're going to leave all these problems of activism and come and do some real intellectual and academic work, so they signed it. The administration had then been praised by the Washington Post after approving the project. Our first debate was Malcolm X versus Bayard Rustin. Of course, it was important. Once the administration saw Malcolm X, they didn't know what to do. They didn't want him there, but they'd just been praised for being liberal, so they were already finished. There was nothing they could do. And Bayard Rustin was brought. The debate was important for us in NAG, the Nonviolent Action Group at that time, around SNCC, because there were great divisions. And Bayard Rustin and Malcolm X posed these divisions, the approaches towards the solution. So the Malcolm X debate and the Bayard Rustin debate had a profound effect upon the Nonviolent Action Group and consequently SNCC, because of the role that the Nonviolent Action Group played, and of course consequently the country because of the role that SNCC played. Well, in the first place, we had the struggles there about nationalism versus non-nationalism or straight integration. The question of determination, all the problems of the values of the societies were being raised at that time. And this debate helped to clarify for all of us all of those issues and drive a clear line between those of us who really became clear nationalists as opposed to non-nationalists. And from this nationalism here, if you will look in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you would see that the Nonviolent Action Group from DC brought it in full flavor. It was from this point that it can be dated where nationalism took its firm root and became dominant inside of the Nonviolent Action Group. It was from Malcolm's debate.
And how did you personally feel?
I felt, well, I worked with Project Awareness, and I remember very well saying to them that I'm going to do all the work that needs to be done before Malcolm X gets here. I will sweep floors, I will lick envelopes. But the night that Malcolm X comes here, I am doing no work, I'm sitting in the audience. And as a matter of fact, I had reserved seats in front, and the place was packed. First, they thought they couldn't even get in. But since I was working on the project, I reserved it. I sat in front through the whole debate. I did all the work for the committee. But during the debate, I was in front. As a matter of fact, the Nation of Islam, in their newspaper, Muhammad Speaks, carried my photo. Nobody knew who I was at that time, as students who were enthusiastic at Malcolm's report. Malcolm finished them. And for me, after that, anytime they said anything, I just used to send them straight to Malcolm. He gave us all the intellectual arguments and opened up the way for us to show clearly an intellectual basis for a nationalism and an ability to smash all ideas that were in contradiction to it. Malcolm opened up the way, and more importantly, he opened up the way for violence as a legitimate weapon in a struggle for human rights. His philosophy probably really took hold in SNCC. Probably you will see its beginning by Selma, Alabama, where Silas Norman, who was our project director, along with Brother Harris, the photographer. After the 1962 debate at Howard University with the Nonviolent Action Group, Malcolm's ideas began to take firm root inside of SNCC through NAG, only in just one way, of course, through other contacts. Probably its most systematic introduction into SNCC would come in Selma, Alabama, where Doug and Tina Harris, who were on SNCC staff in Selma, Alabama at that time, through their contacts in New York, would have every week Malcolm's speech from the Audubon taped and sent down to the Selma SNCC office, where copies would be had and would be passed around within the SNCC staff people. So working outside of Selma in Lowndes County, Bob Mance and myself were to ensure that every week we would get that tape and we would play Malcolm X throughout the week inside of Lowndes County. Of course, it was here that he was invited by Silas Norman, who was then our project director before I went to Alabama. This would be January of 1965, just before the Selma March. He was invited by SNCC to come in. Well, they invited him, number one, because SNCC took a trip to Africa in 1964, invited by President Sekou Ture, incidentally, of Guinea. And from Guinea, the SNCC delegation continued. Malcolm X had also taken a trip to Africa and had preceded SNCC on this trip. And through some coincidence, it seemed that the SNCC people followed in Malcolm's footsteps in the same countries. And I remember John Lewis, when giving the report, having to say that, he said, you don't know the effect that Malcolm X has. Every country we went into where Malcolm X spoke, we were asked in our position in relationship to Malcolm's position. So many people in SNCC who didn't even know who Malcolm was began to sit up and take notice. So here in SNCC, it became first thought, right? Malcolm X is having an effect where you don't even think he's having an effect, so people began to look closer. Of course, the closer they looked to Malcolm X, the quicker they got hooked on Malcolm X. So by 1965, Selma, Alabama was prepared to invite SNCC into Selma to speak. No one in SNCC could oppose it. As a matter of fact, everyone was happy. Of course, the Mississippi Project, since 1964, had made contact with Malcolm X, with Mrs. Hamer, and we had sent our youth wing out from the Delta, where I was congressional director, to have a meeting with Malcolm X. So the meetings in Malcolm X were continuing, but its real profound impact was probably the 1962 debate with Bayard Rustin. I go back to this point because Bayard Rustin had an effect also upon SNCC people.
When Malcolm X returned to the United States on November 24 of 1964 from his second tour and Pan-African Alliance work in Africa, he spent a total of 25 weeks abroad that year establishing successful concrete political ties with the Pan-African and Muslim world. The following month, in December 1964, was the opportunity for Malcolm to further strengthen his ties with the civil rights movement and his connection to SNCC. Representatives of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party toured the northern cities seeking moral, political, and financial support for their campaign to block the seating of Mississippi's 5 segregationist U.S. representatives when Congress convened on January 4, 1965. In Harlem, an ad hoc committee supporting the Freedom Democratic Party campaign organized a rally on December 20 of 1964. The chief speaker was Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, the MFDP candidate for Congress, whose personal testimony about racial brutality had attracted wide attention at the Democratic Party National Convention in August of 1964. The meeting was held at the Williams Institute CME Church in Harlem, with the audience about 1/3 white. Malcolm X spoke too. After Fannie Lou Hamer's moving address and after the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's freedom singers had presented various songs, including Odinga, Odinga of Kenya.
2 or 3 years ago, this wouldn't have been done. 2 or 3 years ago, most of our people would choose to sing about someone who was, passive and meek and humble and forgiving. But Odinga is not passive. He's not meek. He's not humble. He's not nonviolent. But he's free. Odinga is vice president under Jomo Kenyatta, and Jomo Kenyatta was considered to be the organizer of the Mau Mau. And I think you mentioned the Mau Mau in that song. And if you analyze closely those words, I think you'll have the key to how to straighten the situation out in Mississippi. The senator from Mississippi, one senator from Mississippi is over the House Judiciary Committee. He's in Washington, D.C., as Mrs. Hamer has pointed out, illegally. Every senator from a state where our people are deprived of the right to vote, they're in Washington, D.C., illegally. I might say, secondly, some people wonder, well, what has Harlem got to do? What does Mississippi have to do with Harlem? It isn't actually Mississippi. It's America. America is Mississippi. There's no such thing as a Mason-Dixon line. It's America. There's no such thing as the South. It's America. If one room in your house is dirty, you got a dirty house. If the closet is dirty, you got a dirty house. Don't say that that room is dirty, but the rest of my house is clean. You're over the whole house. You have authority over the whole house. The entire house is under your jurisdiction. And the mistake that you and I make is letting these northern crackers shift the weight to the southern crackers.
At that same rally, Malcolm X had invited Fannie Lou Hamer and the Freedom Singers to appear at the Organization of Afro-American Unity held at the Audubon Ballroom on the evening of December 20th, 1964. At the end of 1964, a delegation of 37 teenagers from McComb, Mississippi, came to New York for their Christmas vacation. The 8-day trip was sponsored by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee for young people who had been outstanding in the civil rights struggle in their hometown. The McComb youth attended various meetings and discussions in Harlem. Toward the end of their stay, on December 31st, 1964, they visited the Hotel Teresa to learn what Malcolm X stood for. The following is a small portion of what Malcolm told them.
One of the first things I think young people, especially nowadays, should learn how to do is see for yourself and listen for yourself and think for yourself, and then you can come to an intelligent decision for yourself. But if you form the habit of going by what you hear others say about someone, or going by what others think about someone, instead of going and searching that thing out for yourself and seeing for yourself, you will be walking west when you think you're going east. You'll be walking east when you think you're going west. So this generation, especially of our people, have a burden upon themselves more so than at any other time in history. The most important thing we can learn how to do today is think for ourselves. It's good to keep wide open ears and listen to what everybody else has to say. But when you come to make a decision, you have to weigh all of what you heard of its own and place it where it belongs. And then come to a decision for yourself, and you'll never regret it. But if you form the habit of taking what someone else says about a thing without checking it out for yourself, you'll find that other people will have you hating your own friends and loving their enemies. And this is one of the things that our people are beginning to learn today, that it's very important to think out a situation for yourself. If you don't do it, then you'll always be maneuvered into you'll never fight your enemies, but you will find yourself fighting your own self. There has been a move on to keep the Negro thinking in this country that he was making strides in the civil rights field, only for the purpose of distracting him and not letting him know that were he to acquaint himself with the structure of the United Nations and the politics of the United Nations, the aim and the purpose of the United Nations, he could lift his problem into that world body, and he'd have the strongest stick in the world that he could use against the racists in Mississippi. But it was known that and one of the arguments against getting you and me to do this has always been that our problem is a domestic problem of the United States. And as such, we should not think to put it at a level where somebody else can come and mess with the United States domestic affairs. But you're giving Uncle Sam a break. Uncle Sam's got his hands in the Congo, in Cuba, in South America, in Saigon. Uncle Sam has got his bloody hands in every continent and in everybody else's business on this earth. But at the same time, when it comes to taking forceful action in this country, where our rights are concerned, he's always going to tell you and me, well, these are states' rights. And I wanted to point this out to you because it is important for you to know that when you're in Mississippi, you're not alone. But as long as you think you're alone, then you take a stand as if you're a minority or as if you're outnumbered, and that kind of stand will never enable you to win a battle. You've got to know that you've got as much power on your side as that Ku Klux Klan has on its side. And when you know that you've got just as much power on your side as the Klan has on its side, you'll talk the same kind of language with that Klan is talking with you.
In 1964, 97% of the black American voters supported Lyndon B. Johnson. And the first act of the Democratic Party, Lyndon B. included, in 1965, when the representatives from the state of Mississippi who refused to support Johnson came to Washington, D.C., and the black people of Mississippi sent representatives there to challenge the legality of these people being treated. What did Johnson say? Nothing. What did Humphrey say? Nothing. What did Robert Pretty Boy Kennedy say? Nothing. Nothing. Not one thing. These are the people that black people have supported. This is the party that they have supported. Where were they when the black man needed them last couple of days ago in Washington, D.C.? They were where they always are, twiddling their thumbs someplace in the pool room or in the gallery. So black people in 1964 will not be controlled by these Uncle Tom leaders, you believe? They won't be held in jail. They won't be held on the plantation by the overseers. They won't be held in the corral. They won't be held back at all. The frustration of these black representatives from Mississippi when they arrived in Washington, D.C. the other day, thinking, you know, that the great society was going to include them, only to see the door closed in their face like that. That's what makes them think. That's what makes them realize what they're up against. It is this type of frustration that produced the Mau Mau. They reached the point where they saw it takes power to talk to power. It takes power to make power respected. It takes madness almost to deal with a power structure that's so corrupt. So corrupt. So in 1965, we should see a lot of action. Since the old methods haven't worked, they'll be forced to try new methods. If we get involved in the civil rights movement and go to Mississippi or any place else to help our people get registered to vote, we intend to go prepared. We don't intend to break the law, because when you're trying to register to vote, you're upholding the law. It's the one who tries to prevent you from registering to vote who's breaking the law. And you got a right to protect yourself by any means necessary. And if the government doesn't want civil rights groups going equipped, the government should do its job.